At 1600 Amphitheater Parkway in Mountain View, California, a collection of modest buildings sits among green lawns and winding bike paths. Today, Google's name appears on the entrance, and most of the employees who pass through these doors have no idea who occupied the campus before them, long before it became the Googleplex. And before Google's search business took over the site, this was the home of a company known as Silicon Graphics. At its height, in 1995, Silicon Graphics carried a market value of roughly $7 billion. Its computers brought the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park to life. Its technology helped drive the Nintendo 64. Its engineers created the 3D graphics standards that continue to shape the language of modern GPUs. By 2009, the remnants of Silicon Graphics were acquired for just $25 million. The campus remained standing. The company behind it was gone, and the story of its rise and collapse starts with a high school dropout from a small town in West Texas, a kid who was once suspended after setting off a smoke bomb on a school bus. You are watching History of American Electronics and Tech, where we break down the companies that built the modern electronic world, tracing them from the circuits they created to the engineers who made them possible. If that kind of history interests you, subscribe and leave a like, because the technology behind Silicon Graphics was every bit as remarkable as the business decisions that eventually brought it down. Both stories deserve to be examined in full detail. James Clark entered the world in 1944 in Plainview, Texas, a small farming community on the high plains where success was counted in farmland, not inventions. He left high school at the age of 16 and spent the next 4 years serving in the United States Navy. It was there that he was given an electronics manual, and something about the technology captured his attention. Clark began studying at night through Tulane University, entering the classroom without a high school diploma and quickly discovering that determination could outweigh credentials. He went on to earn a bachelor's degree, followed by a master's degree in physics from the University of New Orleans, and eventually a PhD in computer science from the University of Utah, a program that would later become connected to the creation of companies such as Pixar, Adobe, and Atari. By the end of the 1970s, Clark had become an associate professor of electrical engineering at Stanford, where he began focusing on a challenge that few others were willing to tackle: true 3D computer graphics, the technology that allowed an engineer to turn a virtual prototype or a scientist to examine a molecule from any angle, depended on massive mainframe computers that could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Clark believed that same power could be brought down to the desktop, creating a system affordable enough for everyday research labs. By 1981, Clark and his team of graduate students had created the hardware that could make that vision possible. They named it the Geometry Engine. The project was developed at Stanford under an RPA research contract, with Clark working alongside graduate student Mark Hanna. Hanna, a black electrical engineer from the Illinois Institute of Technology, had traveled west to pursue his master's and doctoral degrees. Together, they created the first processor of its kind, a single silicon chip designed to speed up the complex geometry calculations needed to generate three-dimensional images in real time. Clark secured a patent for the invention. In 1982, Clark left Stanford with 7 of his graduate students: Mark Hanna, Kurt Akeley, David Brown, Rocky Rhodes, Tom Davis, Herb Kuda, Mark Grossman, and Abby Silverstone, to create a new company called Silicon Graphics. The startup received its initial funding from the Mayfield Fund. Clark understood that his strength was in invention rather than corporate leadership, so he recruited Ed McCracken, a longtime Hewlett-Packard executive, to take over the role of CEO and guide the company's growth. The company's first product, the Iris 1000 graphics terminal, reached the market in 1983. The very first production system was delivered to Carnegie Mellon University, but the customer that would transform Silicon Graphics' future was not an academic institution. Every startup is a grind, Clark would later say, but we spent nearly 5 years convincing people that 3D graphics mattered before the market finally caught on. The Iris systems remained specialized tools at first, used by engineers who wanted to test designs digitally instead of building expensive physical models, and by scientists studying molecular structures. Silicon Graphics managed to endure those difficult early years partly because its biggest potential rivals, Hewlett-Packard, Sun Microsystems, and IBM, failed to recognize the importance of 3D computing soon enough, leaving the company with a rare opportunity to define the market almost by itself. In 1986, the year Silicon Graphics entered the public market, the company reported $40 million in revenue. It was a solid number, but still small by technology industry standards. Then came a decision that would push the company into an entirely new arena. In 1984, Silicon Graphics placed one of its prototype workstations in the hands of George Lucas at no cost. Soon after, Industrial Light and Magic began purchasing SGI systems. Mark Hanna, who had become SGI's principal scientist, began creating the software tools that would power some of Hollywood's most groundbreaking visual effects: the transformations of Terminator 2, the animated objects of Beauty and the Beast, and the luminous environments of Aladdin. Hanna's name is often absent from the popular histories of Silicon Graphics. Clark is remembered as the company's visionary founder, but Hanna helped build the graphics technology that brought those visions to life. By 1991, the partnership between Silicon Valley and Hollywood had become firmly established. That same year, SGI introduced a new system that carried the internal code name Hollywood. The machine would go on to prove that name was more than appropriate. The Iris Indigo debuted in July of 1991 with a starting price of $7,995. It was a compact, deep blue desktop workstation weighing about 25 pounds, small enough to fit on a single desk, while delivering capabilities that competing systems at the same price could not match. Powered by a MIPS processor and equipped with dedicated hardware for 3D rendering, it brought professional-level graphics performance to a much wider audience. Even its startup sequence was different, playing a soft musical tone instead of the usual computer beep. One reviewer described it as one of the most impressive product introductions in years, praising the machine for its rare combination of capability, speed, and affordability. Kurt Akeley, one of Silicon Graphics' original founders, was the engineer behind the frame buffers and processor subsystems that powered every SGI system dating back to the first Iris terminal. His work formed the foundation of the graphics architecture that made the Indigo possible. By 1992, Silicon Graphics had grown enough to earn a place on the Fortune 500 list. But in that same year, Akeley and his team made a choice that would shape computer graphics for generations. They took SGI's internal Iris graphics system, redesigned and expanded it, then released it to the industry under a new name, OpenGL. By making the technology available with minimal licensing restrictions, Silicon Graphics allowed hardware companies around the world to support fast, efficient, cross-platform 3D graphics through a common standard that had originally been created for SGI's own machines. That decision can be viewed from two different angles, and a fair history has to acknowledge both. It was an act of vision and openness, helping turn 3D graphics into a universal technology while securing SGI's influence across the entire industry. But it was also the beginning of a problem because the same tools that expanded the market gave competitors the foundation they needed to create less expensive alternatives. Both interpretations are accurate. Neither one explains the full picture by itself. In 1993, Steven Spielberg released Jurassic Park, and the relationship between Hollywood and computer graphics was permanently transformed. Industrial Light and Magic relied on more than 70 SGI systems to create the film's digital dinosaurs, ranging from desktop Indigo workstations to massive Onyx visualization machines powered by Kurt Akeley's Reality Engine. It marked the first time that 3D graphics hardware had become a central part of producing a major motion picture. An SGI Crimson workstation even appeared within the movie itself, while the realistic-looking Iris three-dimensional file browser became one of the most recognizable computer interfaces ever shown on screen. Then came Forrest Gump and The Mask, followed in 1995 by Toy Story, the first feature-length film created entirely with computer-generated imagery and rendered using SGI technology. From 1995 until 2002, SGI workstations played a role in the creation of every film nominated for the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. That same year, in 1993, SGI entered into a partnership with Nintendo on a project known internally as Reality. Engineer Wei Yen led the team responsible for creating the Reality coprocessor, the graphics technology that would power the Nintendo 64 when it launched in 1996 for less than $250. The console went on to sell nearly 33 million units around the world. SGI's technology had moved beyond research labs and movie studios and into millions of homes. And for the moment, the company's revenue continued to rise. Under McCracken's leadership, Silicon Graphics expanded dramatically, growing from just $5.4 million in annual revenue to $3.7 billion over a 13-year period. By 1995, the company's market value had climbed past $7 billion, and its workforce had grown to more than 10,000 employees. The Indigo became the workstation that defined an era. Its deep blue enclosure, distinctive startup sound, and powerful MIPS processor made it instantly recognizable. The system positioned behind Samuel L. Jackson in the Jurassic Park control room was not a movie prop. It was an actual Indigo running IRIX. Decades later, collectors still bring these machines back to life, installing software from an operating system that SGI officially ended support for in 2013 because the hardware was simply too impressive to discard. A functioning Indigo equipped with Elan graphics can still attract significant interest from those who remember the impact these machines once had. The Onyx belonged to a completely different category of machine. It was not designed to sit beside a monitor on a desk. It was a system large enough to occupy an entire room. Akeley's Reality engine gave it the ability to process multiple streams of complex, fully rendered 3D graphics at the same time. Industrial Light and Magic built entire production environments around these systems. The Onyx demonstrated that computers had reached a point where they could create images convincing enough to stand in for reality itself on the big screen. That achievement transformed an entire industry, but the forces that would eventually challenge SGI were already developing from within its own success. OpenGL had spread to less expensive hardware platforms. The Nintendo 64 had shown that SGI's technology could be adapted for the mass market. Then, in January 1994, Jim Clark stepped down as chairman of the company he had founded. He departed with around 400,000 shares of SGI stock and only weeks later joined Mark Andreessen to create Netscape. The engineer who built Silicon Graphics no longer believed the future belonged to expensive graphics workstations. He saw it moving toward the internet. The company he left behind was about to discover that his prediction was correct. By the middle of the 1990s, ordinary PCs equipped with graphics cards from companies like NVIDIA and ATI were beginning to deliver performance that rivaled SGI systems at a fraction of the price, often around 1/10 the cost. That shift did not happen by chance. Many of the engineers who created those new graphics technologies had previously worked inside SGI and carried that expertise into the broader industry. The arrival of Maya, the 3D animation software SGI obtained through its acquisition of Alias and Wavefront Technologies for roughly $500 million in 1995 on Linux, Windows, and Mac OS, eliminated one of the company's final advantages in professional graphics. A studio that once required a $100,000 Onyx system could now assemble a powerful render farm using inexpensive PCs for less than the price of a single SGI workstation. SGI's attempts to respond only accelerated the decline. In 1997, Ed McCracken was removed as CEO. The company then placed its future on Intel's Itanium processor, intending it to replace SGI's own MIPS architecture. In doing so, it walked away from years of software investment for a platform that arrived late, failed to meet expectations, and left many existing SGI customers facing an uncertain future. At the same time, SGI purchased Cray Research in 1996 for approximately $740 million. Pushing into the high-performance computing market just as demand was shrinking and major customers in defense and energy were reducing research spending. Two major strategic moves, two costly mistakes, and, by then, the company's revenue was already in decline. What came next was a collapse that could be measured in numbers. Silicon Graphics market value plunged from more than $7 billion in 1995 to roughly $120 million when the company was removed from the New York Stock Exchange in November 2005. In May 2006, SGI entered Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company emerged from bankruptcy that October, relocated its headquarters from Mountain View to Sunnyvale, and sold its Amphitheater Parkway campus to Google for $319 million. Google had already been leasing space on the property since 2003. SGI's former North Shoreline Boulevard facility later became the home of the Computer History Museum. The breakup continued piece by piece. The Cray business was sold to Terra Computer for $35 million. Alias changed hands for $57 million. SGI eventually ended its MIPS and IRIX product lines, marking the end of the technologies that had defined the company. Then, in April 2009, SGI entered bankruptcy protection for a second time and sold its remaining assets to Rackable Systems for $25 million, with the final deal closing at $42.5 million. Shareholders were left with nothing. Rackable adopted the SGI name, and in 2016, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise acquired that company for $275 million. A business that had once been worth more than $7 billion was gradually dismantled, sold off, and absorbed into other organizations until only fragments remained, some patents, some technology, and a name that no longer belonged to the company that created it. But the machines lived on. Collectors around the world still keep Indigos and Onyx systems running, exchanging spare parts across continents and installing IRIX on hardware that was released before some of its current owners were even born. These workstations continue to be maintained decades after SGI abandoned official support, not because they are easy to preserve, but because the engineering behind them was too remarkable to simply disappear. OpenGL endured in a different way. Akeley's work evolved into the foundations of modern graphics standards, with its legacy continuing through technologies such as Vulkan, while the standard SGI released to the world now powers billions of devices across the globe. The Nintendo 64, built around the Reality coprocessor created by Wei Yen's team in Mountain View, has become one of the most sought-after gaming consoles among collectors. When Yen departed SGI in 1997, he brought 20 engineers with him to create ArtX, the company responsible for designing the graphics chip used in the Nintendo GameCube. ATI Technologies purchased ArtX in 2000 for $400 million. The technological family tree of silicon graphics continues through later Nintendo systems, through ATI, through AMD, and into the graphics processors inside the devices people use every day. The company disappeared, but its technology lives on everywhere. At 1600 Amphitheater Parkway, the buildings remain. Today, a dinosaur skeleton stands on Google's campus, and some believe it is a quiet tribute to Jurassic Park, a reminder of the SGI machines that helped bring computer-generated dinosaurs to life from that same Mountain View office complex. Google has never officially confirmed the connection. What remains undeniable is this: the campus Silicon Graphics, built as the headquarters of the world's leading graphics company, now belongs to a company that organizes the world's information. The SGI sign was removed. A different name replaced it. The original machines have disappeared. The shares are gone. The company's identity belongs to someone else. But the technology it created remains everywhere, in your pocket, on your screen, and inside every digital world brought to life through images that never existed until a computer created them. Silicon Graphics did not simply fail in the 3D graphics industry. It built that industry from the ground up, unlocked the possibilities, and then watched the world move through the doorway it had created, leaving the company behind. If you ever sat behind an SGI workstation, if you compiled code on an Onyx or brought an Indigo to life, if you walked the halls of the Mountain View headquarters or revived a piece of surplus hardware with a fresh IRIX install, leave a comment below. Share your model, the year you ran it, and whether it still fires up today. The creators who engineered these systems and the professionals who pushed their limits understand what disappeared far better than the corporations that acquired the remnants. Hit subscribe so these tech legacies are never forgotten. Next up, we are diving into the rise and fall of another legendary American technology empire, and you definitely want to see how that story unfolds.